Hey guys, Andy here, and today we have an eyeshadow palette tag. This one was created by Samantha Marsh and Allie Glines, and I will leave them as well as Dub's Beauty Diary all linked down below because that's who I saw do this video first. And this is just a 13 questionnaire talking about palettes, and I have physical palettes next to me, so if you're curious about that, stay tuned. And as always, if you like the makeup on my face, everything I'm wearing will be listed in the description box down below. And if you like makeup unboxings with a little bit of horror sprinkled in, please consider subscribing, as I would love to have you here. And let's just go ahead and roll on into these palettes. Alright, so like I said, this was created by Samantha March and Allie Glines, but I saw Dub's Beauty Diary do this, which is who I see do all of my palette tag videos that I do. So if you haven't checked her out, please do. Again, all of them will be listed in the description box. And yeah, this is a 13 questionnaire. And I think I only have one repeating palette. I tried to pick different palettes for every single one of these, but the first question is newest palette. So for me, it's the one that's currently on my eyes. And this is the Winky Luxe Latte Kitten palette, which the color story looks like this. Like I said, it is what is on my eyes. I used all three mattes, and then I used these two shimmers. I think this palette smells like hot cocoa. Personally, I don't think it smells like coffee. I definitely think it smells like hot cocoa, but I really like how soft and silky this palette is, and it's my first time using it. I think the look turned out really cute. I got this from Jen Beauty. I will also leave her tagged below if you haven't checked out her channel. She sent this over in some friend mail, so I was super happy to get that. But that is my newest palette, and so far, so good. I enjoyed the first look. Question number 2 is oldest palette in your collection, and if those of you don't know, it's my Huda Beauty New Nudes palette. I say if you don't know because this is actually my Pan That palette for this year. So you're getting a little inside look spoiler to my update for March because we have hit a pan. So there's your spoiler alert for my March update. But this is the color story. There is generally a concealer eye base shade here, but mine was so old and icky that I scooped that shade out. But this is my Pan That palette for the year. It's also my oldest palette. I've had this since it came out. I got this 2 months after it released. So whether that was 2017 or 2018, I always forget to write it down. But this is my oldest palette, and yeah, I love her very, very much. So there is that. Question number 3 is your most expensive palette. And for me, that is my Natasha Denona Sunset palette. This is one of the bigger pan ones. This is the $129 palette. Granted, I got this on sale when it was going on sale at Sephora, so I only paid $64.50 or whatever. I paid half price for this, but it's still my most expensive palette that I've spent money on, and I've only used it once, so I really need to get some more use on it. I do really like the color story. I like that we have a red and a yellow because I need more reds in my collection. But yeah, this is definitely my most expensive palette that I have that I need to give more love on specifically. So let's see. Most affordable palette. That's question number 4. For me, that's this little guy. This is a quad from Beauty Vault. And that is what the quad looks like. We have 2 mattes and 2 shimmers. So I think this quad retailed for $15, but I bought this from Ipsy as an add-on for $3. So I paid $3 for this quad. So it is the cheapest quad cheapest palette that I have. And I really like the formula. I've used this once or twice, and I think it's really, really nice. It goes with my hair right now. So maybe I should pull these palettes out and maybe get some use on them since I have them out. If there's any looks you'd like to see or swatches or anything, let me know in the comments, and I have no problem either making a short or doing a look with them, because why not? For question number 5, we have Everyday Palette, and this is the only palette the only question that has a duplicate palette. My everyday palette currently is this Huda New Nudes because it's my pan that palette. So of course, this is my everyday palette. But otherwise, outside of having a pan that palette, I don't really have an everyday palette. I'm one of those people, I love to randomly just cycle through whatever I want to use. So that's why I put this one in there, because currently this year I actually have an everyday palette, but normally I don't, because that's just meh for me. I like to just be random and creative. So for number 6, we have most colorful palette, and that would have to be my ColourPop Fade into Hue, my rainbow palette. This definitely is my most colorful because it is the rainbow. I feel meh about this palette. I like this half way more than this half, but overall it's a pretty nice palette. Number 7, we have the smallest palette, and I have, because they're both from Cella. These are my Cella quads. So we have, this is the Bronze Mini Manifest, and this is the Blushing Rose. But they're both from Cella, they're quads. These are actually $20 travel size palettes, but they're just like, the pans are so tiny, which is why I picked these. Because like, if you look at it compared to these pans, which are like normal standard sized eyeshadow pans, these guys are so small. But they're not bad. They're actually, I've used these both together in a look. I really like the formula on these, even though they're dinky, itty bitty tiny. They're really good. And I hate that they're really good, because I wanted to not like them at all, but I do really like them. My biggest palette, I also have 2 answers for this one, because they're the same size. So they're both from Profusion. I have the Kaleidoscope palette, which is the more colorful version. And then I have the Moonstone, which is the neutrals. And these are 42 shade palettes. So these are my biggest palettes. They are, we'll just take up the whole shot here. They're absolutely huge, but the quality on these is phenomenal. The glitters, Profusion does some of my favorite glitters. I had the Kaleidoscope first. And I love it. There's only one shade in this Kaleidoscope palette that I didn't like, and that was this green Fern. Was super patchy, but other than that, I've basically used every shade in this palette, and I love it. And I loved it so much that I got the Moonstone, because a friend was like, I love it, it's the same great quality, and even though I'm not a huge neutral wearer, like, I want my neutrals in this quality, so I have both of these. They're giant. So, palette with the best memory. This one was hard for me because, I don't know, I have a lot of memories tied to most of my palettes, but I'm going to pick my ColourPop Blue Moon palette. And as you can see, I have a nice pan, which this was organic panning before I even started doing panning content. It's just because this was my very first blue palette. This was my very first colorful palette that I ever bought outside of like neutrals and like a yellowy orange, but even then that's not like colorful, was this blue palette. So this holds a special place in my heart, as this is what really turned me on to color. And I love these 9 pans from ColourPop. Like, it's just, that's such a special palette for me. I don't know if I'll ever be able to get rid of it, but that's the one I had to pick. So the next question is, palette worth the hype? I have this one linked in my link tree, which will be in the description box. It is always at the very bottom with my information on where else you can find me. But this is the Delancey Aurora Glow eyeshadow palette, and this is a UV blacklight palette. I got this on Amazon for like, I think it's $15. So it comes with a giant mirror. And this is what she looks like. As you can see, I have some pans in this. The shadows are not deep at all, and the shades that I have pan in are the glitters, so it's quite easy to hit pan and glitters. But the mattes are all blacklight, and they are UV reactive. So are the glitters. They have some chunkier glitters here that have like stars, and the stars glow in the dark. This is the reason I put this for this one, so that I could put my Fade into Hue, because this is also my other super colorful palette, but I bought this on a whim just to see if it would work, and it does, 100%, and I highly recommend it, but definitely worth the hype, super cheap, it's linked in my link tree, so there it is. The next question, though, is a palette that's not worth the hype, and for me, I had a palette picked out that originally I was going to use for this, but I actually think I have a better answer, because this palette makes me very angry. So I'm changing my answer, because originally my answer was going to be this Pat McGrath Celestial Nirvana palette, and that's just because the mattes are a little patchy, but I actually really enjoy this palette, whereas what I'm actually going to make my answer, this palette is the bane of my existence. I did a whole week's worth of looks with this palette to try to love it, and I don't. This is the Natasha Denona Pastel palette. If you don't know, this is what it looks like. I don't know how some people vibe with this palette, but I just don't. These pastels are so lackluster. The cream shades get hard pan, like, as soon as you use them. They have hard pan. So you have to take care of that every time you want to use this palette. The only shades that I enjoy are a couple shimmers in here. And, like, the one shimmer comes in my Jubilee palette that I have. And this palette makes me so angry because I wanted to enjoy it. And I don't. And I'm happy that I got it off Mercari on a deal, because if I had paid full price for this, I'd be even more pissed. But I didn't. So I can let my blood pressure rest a little bit. But I don't know how people enjoy this palette, because I just can't get it to work for me. I've tried different eye primers. I've tried different brushes. We're going to move on. Favorite palette from your favorite brand. Listen. I have to preface this. This is my Jeffree Star Blood Money palette. I know. He's canceled. He's garbage. Every Jeffree Star palette that I've gotten has been secondhand, because I really love his eyeshadow formula, and I hate that I really love his eyeshadow formula, but I do. And I don't want to support him or his brand personally, which is why I get everything secondhand, because, other people did, and they're getting rid of it. If you're still not okay with that, I completely understand, and that's why I try not to show Jeffree Star too much, but it really is one of my very tippy-top favorite eyeshadow formulas. This is the Blood Money palette, because greens are my absolute favorite. And this is my favorite Jeffree Star palette that I own. This is my favorite green palette that I own. I love this so much. I cherish it with my whole heart. But that's my little spiel. Totally understand if you're still not cool with that. I get it. And I know. So we're awkward. We're going to move on. The last and final question is your most used palette. It's another ColourPop palette. And now I bought this at the same time I bought the Blue Moon palette and the Honey palette. I've told this story a few times. But I bought all three of those in one order. So I had to sit down and open them all up, because they all have pan in them, to figure out which one was technically my most used. And technically it is this one, because I only have the smallest little sliver of this glitter left, and I have major dips in the shade Creamsicle and Tangerine Dreams. Whereas I only have one small pan in here, and I have more of the glitter left in Honey. So this is definitely my most used palette in my entire collection. I really think that I kind of want to put this on my list to finish, because literally if I did one more look, that glitter would be gone. So maybe I'll put that on my list, and I'll have one shadow that's just completely gone, because that would be amazing. But this is definitely my most used palette. I love oranges, no matter what color my hair is. I love orange makeup. Orange eyes, orange blush, orange lips. I love it all. So it makes sense that this is my most used palette, because it's my baby. I think if I hadn't decluttered my very first palette, that would have been this, because that had a few pans in it, but that was so old that the formula had turned and it wasn't performing correctly. And that was the Profusion Sienna's palette. If you don't know what that looks like, I will put up a photo here. That was my very first palette. I loved it so much. I need to repurchase it. I just haven't, but that's my favorite palette. That was my very first palette. But that is sadly decluttered. So this is the next best thing that I have for that. And that was all 13 questions here. So let me know, what do you think? What are your comments? Do you want to see any looks with these? What would you have picked for any of these questions? And as always, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.